some key people who changed the trajectory of my life,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And I think perfect is never perfect. There's always going to be something wrong, right? And
Yeah.
I learned in those moments that if you do something, do it like you love it every day,
Hmm.
right? Because you never know who's going to be tasting, who's going to be watching, who's going to be experiencing.
Welcome to Dishin Diaspora, where we'll explore the journeys of people shaping the food world. Through their stories, we'll uncover how food connects us to culture, history, and each other. I'm your host, Chef Emmy, and today I'm so excited about the guest. Chef Tu David Phu is a first generation Vietnamese American who has carved a remarkable path in the culinary world, blending his Vietnamese heritage with California's vibrant food scene. His acclaimed pop up and recognition as a rising star chef by the San Francisco Chronicle catapulted him into the spotlight. Chef Tu gained national recognition on Top Chef Season 15 and as host of ABC's Taste Buds Chef's Giving. He appeared in an executive produced Bloodline, an Emmy nominated PBS documentary that explored his family's relationship with food as Vietnamese Americans. His cookbook, The Memory of Taste, weaves together the culinary wisdom passed down by his parents with his modern Vietnamese California creation. Most recently, Chef Tu has opened Gigi's, his highly anticipated restaurant and wine bar in San Francisco,
Mhm,
where he offers diners a fresh and innovative take on Vietnamese Californian cuisine. Chef Tu,
mhm.
thank you so much for joining me today. What an honor.
Thank you for having me. I am always so grateful for platforms and persons like yourself willing to listen to my story and share it abroad. So thank you.
Of course, of course. Okay, so before we get started on your story, I like to play a game called Quick Dish. I'm going to name two things and you just pick whichever one speaks most to you. There's no right or wrong answer here. Okay, so street food or fine dining?
Street food,
Buffalo wings or fish sauce wings?
fish sauce wings.
Fusion foods or traditional dishes?
That's a hard one. I'm gonna take a shot. I'm gonna go pass.
Okay, okay. Fresh spring rolls or fried spring rolls?
Fresh spring rolls.
Ramen or pho?
Um, man, I gotta go pho because it's a
Okay.
heritage thing.
Okay. Cooking solo or cooking with a team?
Does my wife count?
Yeah, that's a team, right? You like
Cooking
cooking
with
with
my
it?
wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that.
Mhm.
Spicy or mild?
Spicy. And when I say spicy, black pepper doesn't count.
Amen to that. And then home cooked meals or fancy dinner out?
Home cooked meals.
Love it. Awesome.
Hmm.
Thanks for entertaining me with that.
Of course, yes.
So to start, can you tell me a little bit about your family's background? Your family, your mom and dad are from Vietnam.
Yeah. My parents are from Vietnam. We are from a small island called Phu Quoc. It's referenced as the Fiji of Vietnam is incredibly beautiful, very rural. I think for reference, like when I visited in the mid 1990s, I think on the whole island we had a shared community bathroom and just a few light bulbs
Oh,
to
wow.
illuminate the street. Um, but yeah, unlike the stereotypical understanding, the Western world's understanding of Vietnam, we are islanders and we ate a lot of seafood.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of understanding of coastal cuisine and the way we ate seafood transported us to Oakland, California. So,
Wow. Beautiful.
mhm.
And so you were born in California, in Oakland.
Actually, there's this misconception. I actually was born in Minnesota, and then
Oh,
my parents landed in Oakland. My sister was born in Oakland, my older sister, that is.
okay.
And then for some reason, they found an opportunity to, like what people are doing now, find cheaper living of cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Up in Minnesota, as Southeast Asians going through a tropical storm gave birth to me, not tropical storm, but Southeast Asians who lived in a tropical climate gave birth to me in Minnesota in the spring. By the time the next winter came, my sister had lost her glove on a school bus
Mm-hmm.
and got frostbite in her finger. As
Wow.
people from a tropical climate, they're like, what is this coldness?
Oh,
We've never
wow.
seen coldness.
Mm-hmm.
do damage
Right.
the way it does. So they freaked out and moved back to Oakland.
Oh,
So
wow.
I have no memory of Minnesota, unfortunately, but
Okay.
most of my life just spent in my adolescence was in Oakland,
In
California.
Oakland. Okay, gotcha, gotcha. So
Mhm.
how was that growing up? So I was born in Brazil and I immigrated to Seattle with my family when I was 6 years old. So kind of how you just, coming from this beautiful sunshine, and I descended upon SeaTac Airport in February and it was like dark and dreary and gray and I was like, what is this? I couldn't even put into words what was going through my mind as a little 6 year old, coming from bright, beautiful Brazil. So like, and then how was it growing up with Vietnamese parents being the first generation? Was the Vietnamese culture really present at home?
I think um, culture is such a firecracker of a word,
Mm.
right? Because it means different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, I think the dynamic is that I grew up in West Oakland in a predominantly Black neighborhood,
Mm.
children of Black Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
We have stories of Tupac frequenting our neighborhoods,
Wow.
Huey P. Newton as well. So for me, I was embedded in Oakland culture, and I think as a subtact to that, um, I had my birthright and heritage. And I think my parents more so um, gave it to me in this unfiltered, raw way. And I think that's a very interesting conversation because when people think that I'm saying that I'm highlighting Vietnamese culture or I learned Vietnamese culture, what does that exactly mean? I
Mm.
think for me, it was just my parents' journey as people,
Mm-hmm.
or generational stories of who we are. That's how we understood to be Vietnamese. Because my story of being Vietnamese in that particular perspective is totally different from someone from a different prefecture, whether it's like someone from North Vietnam or Central Vietnam, our stories would be
Mm-hmm.
completely different.
Yeah.
And to add more nuance to it, because we're islanders, I'm a big fucking Asian. I'm like 6'1", 6'2". You've seen me,
Yeah,
Annie, right?
yeah.
Like
You're very tall.
I'm like 240. So when people see me, they're like, I didn't realize you were so big. I was like, why did you think I was small in the first place?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. Wow, yeah.
Um,
No, that totally, yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense. Everybody has different experience. I think that like for me coming to Seattle, where we're from, Bahia is, where Afro Brazilians. There's a lot of black people in
yeah.
that area, and
Mhm.
even coming to Seattle, there were other Brazilians, but there weren't a lot of black Brazilians too. So even that in itself was like a different like experience for me and my
Yeah.
background. And so
And I'm sure you get this on social media as well too, is that people pull the culture card on you.
yeah.
They're like, or the birthright. That's not really Brazilian. You're not really
Oh
Brazil. And
yeah. 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 And some
I get the same with Vietnamese, right? Like
yeah.
you're not Vietnamese. You're not a real Vietnamese.
Totally. Yeah. No, totally. And I mean, I think that like now looking back at my childhood, my whole experience, I was born in Brazil. So, yes, technically I was a Brazilian, but I left really early, 6 years old. I have
Mm,
some memories, but not a lot. I grew up here in Seattle and it was just, I never felt Brazilian enough, never felt American enough. I just really operated in this like third culture space where I was just like trying to survive and assimilate to
yeah.
whatever situation I was in on any God given day. Honestly, it was just really like survival mode for a really, really long time. Do you feel
Yeah.
like that was the experience for you as well, or did you did you feel like you were American enough or Vietnamese enough, or did it not even matter to you? Like, was that not even a thing for you?
I felt out of place, but also at the same time, I felt very blessed to be in a place like the Bay Area, in particular
Mm-hmm.
Oakland. I think Oakland's a big melting pot,
Mm.
right? I think in contrast to a place like New York, where the boroughs are divided by cultural communities, right, of different ethnic backgrounds. So you have a Jewish, you have, the Puerto Ricans in one neighborhood, you have the Cantonese Chinese in another neighborhood, the Mandarin Chinese in another neighborhood. I think in Oakland it was really different. It
Mm.
was just there's a freeway that divided people who live in the hills and people who live in the flatlands. People who live in the flatlands were poor people, period,
Yeah.
right? And this interesting dynamic that I grew up with, especially when we saw the economic boom of Oakland, when Silicon Valley, Oakland was a part of that. It benefited from the economic growth of Silicon Valley, thus transporting. a lot of rich people to our area. The thing that I've always been proud of, and I reference this into compare and contrast to like a place like in Atlanta, that you can go to any high-end restaurant, low-end restaurant, and there are people of all different backgrounds dressed in jeans, pulling up on a Prius, pulling up on a bicycle,
Mm.
and you wouldn't be able to tell who's a millionaire or not,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's sort of the dynamic that I grew up with. I think was a privilege for me to kind of grow up in Oakland. However, um, um, my parents had an interest for me to be more American than Vietnamese. And
Mm.
I think there was a self-shame because, they are people of war. Now, it's been across, my family has been in multiple generations of war, period. There's more than just the Vietnamese American War. There was a
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam and Portuguese conflict, Vietnam and French conflict. China was in Vietnam for over 1,000 years. X, Y, and Z, on and on. And the thing that people don't understand is when there is occupation, that is equal to war because it means that resources, agriculture get rediverted someplace else and people starve. It
Mm-hmm.
means that people get killed. It means that women get raped.
Mm-hmm.
It means that all the atrocities of wars happen under occupation. So to me, war and occupation is synonymous with each
Mm-hmm.
other. And considering those things, I think my parents growing up, I didn't hear stories about being Vietnamese because I think their identities, their the space that they took up on Earth, their souls were preyed on. I felt like treated as if they were less than human beings, and people were trying to exterminate them,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's just focus on the Vietnamese American War. I think there are victims on both sides of the war, but I think the atrocities of that war are is the fact that it was very experimental. They dropped to this day, unfortunately, that was the most intensive bombing campaign ever in any history of war,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
In addition to that, they sprayed Agent Orange that decimated agriculture, so that meant people starved,
Yeah.
right? My grandfather personally was sprayed with phosphorus. Phosphorus is a chemical that when you get it on your skin, it eats away at your skin and you die immediately from the burning sensation.
Wow.
Um, so, a loaded question. When when my parents introduced to me the idea of identity,
Mm-hmm.
I felt like they had a self-shame. They were like, don't tell people. And this is a common PTSD thing,
Mm.
is that we want people to know that you're American,
Mm.
right? Of
Mm-hmm.
course, you could be Vietnamese. We want you to know your family, know your roots, go back to Vietnam and visit.
Mm-hmm.
But we want you to know that we want people to know that you're American, right? They saw more value in being American than Vietnamese.
Wow.
And it wasn't until years later where I think in my late teens, going into my adulthood, I had, you know, you know, just having moments of reminiscence with my friends who are predominantly black and brown.
Mm-hmm.
And I would see, I would be a part of their family traditions where they would have beautiful Christmases. They would have um, catalogs of photographs from multiple generations past talking about grandfathers, how they used to be a cowboy or um contributing to a family narrative. My family doesn't have any of that stuff,
Wow.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So naturally, as a young man, I was curious
Yeah.
and I wanted to ask. And I think that's how my food journey kind of evolved, specifically in Vietnamese cuisine, was that, I'll cook with my mom and I had no idea about my mom, right? But I would get insights to who she was as a person, not just a mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
How she fell in love with my dad fell in love with her. Even moments of scarcity, like, weeping, um, scolding me over dropped grains of rice down the drain because, there's moments where their livelihood as when she was a child, in a time of war, food would be rationed.
Mm.
And obviously you get a pail, but if you're 10 years old, sometimes you lose your pail, or your bucket, or your cup, or your bowl to go get the ration of rice, or someone steals it
Mm.
and all you have left is your shirt. You're walking half a mile, as a 10-year-old
Yeah.
with your shirt, cupping this rice that's your family's livelihood is dependent
Mm.
on. right?
Wow.
So, um, like I said, like loaded question.
Yeah.
I really think for me, I wanted to, of course, it's everyone wants to learn about their culture, but for me, selfishly, I wanted to humanize my parents.
Mm.
And learning about my parents and giving them the sitting there and learning about them, and hearing about their stories, it illustrates to me the greatness that they have contributed, not just to our family, but to our society, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and I think that's the thing that we don't do enough in our society is that we listen to people talk about how many code plunges they do where it contributes to them being a millionaire, right? Or it's a mindset. I
Mm-hmm.
feel that geniuses can be poor,
Mm.
brilliant people can be poor, marginalized, and sometimes all they need is for someone to listen. And that's what I decided to do with my parents,
Yeah.
right? Mhm.
Wow, that's beautiful. I was listening to your TED talk, and when you started it, you were talking about your mom and her gardening and how kind of she went,
Mhm.
between her garden and her kitchen. So I that was that one of the ways that they held on to a part of them being Vietnamese and with food. I think that was like probably the light a light thing that
100%.
they could hold on
Yeah.
to where it didn't feel so heavy and they were ashamed. So.
If I could say this, is that I think a lot of us brown folks and black folks, a lot of our knowledge, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Ancestral knowledge is
Yeah.
taught word of mouth through our
Mhm.
matriarchs.
Yeah.
And me just working in a bunch of organizations around the world, specifically um, here with California farmers, even incarcerated men in
Mhm.
San Quentin and some aqua farmers in Southeast Asia, I learned to identify innovation outside the science lab,
Mhm.
right? Or and it happens a lot in sustainability that's overlooked, right? Just because we weren't able to understand it in like a modern scientific way, which we are able to do that now. I've personally always discounted
Mhm.
that sort of information, specifically from my mom. I'm like,
Yeah.
Mom, what book did you get this from?
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
And in doing so, I feel like it will afford us so much more valuable information, not just to help our environment, but to help ourselves
Mhm.
in all its shapes and forms that that information can come in.
Mhm.
And like I said, underscoring and underlying,
Yeah.
you know, things that's taught word of mouth.
Yeah.
And if it isn't written, maybe somebody should write it down.
Right.
Maybe you should write it down and publish it. And that's
Yeah.
what my cookbook is. So
Beautiful, beautiful. That yeah, that
thank you.
totally. Like I'd see like my grandma or my dad would do things, whether it be like preservation techniques and stuff, where they couldn't put a name to it. He just knew that that's what you did. That's what his sisters
Mm.
did. That's what his mom did, and like really just
Yeah.
like passed it down. So I think that was beautiful. And when you were talking in your TED talk, it really reminded me about because you were saying like your mom was doing that before it was trendy, before it was even like a thing here for us, for some people in the United States. And
I just want to say a lot of our moms, a lot
yeah,
of our families did that before it was trendy
yeah,
at all, right?
exactly. Mm-hmm.
A lot of people did yoga before that shit was trendy, right?
Right, exactly. No, absolutely. And I was just thinking back, like my childhood really involved like every day we would walk to the Feta, which is what you would call a farmer's market, just an open air market. We would get our fresh fish, like, from the fishermen, meats from the butcher, all the fresh produce and stuff. And that was just like the way of life back then. It
That's
wasn't
right.
anything fancy. It
Hmm.
was just what we did. Actually, in fact, I think it was like what the poor people did, or the help did
Yeah.
for the
Hmm.
rich
Hmm.
people. And then when we came here, that the farmers market was something that wasn't accessible to us. It was the
Hmm.
trendy thing for people to do. It was people who had money. It was more expensive. We were going to food banks, and we were
Real talk.
we didn't have access to that. So there's also kind of like me thinking back to having lost these traditions because I didn't have it wasn't accessible to people like me, minorities, poor. So
Mm.
that's
Mm.
something that I often think about, and you talking about your mom gardening kind of brought up those memories for me.
100%, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the power of moms too, is that even though
Mhm.
we grew up poor, I didn't understand the depth of poverty that we were in until I was an adult. You
Mhm.
know, like,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
just
definitely.
reflecting back, like, uh, like, I think a lot of the traumas, a lot of the PTSD that I kind of identified in my parents, which are undiagnosed, by the way, I
Mhm.
learned working through community organizations,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think that
like, I think,
oh, go ahead.
no, no, please. Yeah.
I think there's like a lot of like similarities between first generation kids like yourself and like child immigrants. And I like now I'm using that word like trauma because my move here was very traumatic for me. I was a child. I didn't really know what was happening. I didn't know that we were moving forever. I was just going along with with my dad coming to this
So,
new place to see my mom who came 6 months before us. So even my mom like leaving first was like pretty traumatic, and not having her with me for 6 months as like a 5, 6 year old. So kind of looking back at all of that, just now, and like putting the words to it, and like trying to do the work to kind of recover from all of that,
yeah,
and understanding why I operate the way I do in certain situations has really been like a game changer for me. But I see a lot of
yeah,
similarities with like first generation kids and child immigrants, and kind of like living in this like third culture in between, this like new American culture, and then kind of like that of where they came from or where their parents came from. And I just was wondering like what.
and I
uh
no, that question excites me.
yeah.
I'm just answering the phrase the
Yeah, oh no,
question.
yeah. No, totally, go ahead. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, that I think that hits home for me because, like I said, I grew up in Oakland. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of my friends growing up didn't come back because they went to the grocery store, and they got
Mm-hmm.
caught in crossfire. I
Mm-hmm.
had a friend who had a mother, I think at 12 years old, got caught in broad daylight crossfire in West Oakland,
Mm.
right? Bringing in groceries. So
Wow.
just, I mean, this is West and East Oakland.
Yeah.
In the 90s is pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't want to over glorify it. There are beautiful things about Oakland. It's just
Mm-hmm.
there's unfortunate things about that. But just considering that context, I always had this survivor, I think it's called survivor's guilt,
Mm.
where I always had this thought in the back of my mind was like, I had a friend that I admire, and it was my conviction that he was smarter, better, more handsome, whatever it is,
Mm-hmm.
better than me. Why didn't he make it?
Mm.
Why am I alive?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
And even
I'm
like,
getting I'm getting emotional. I'm sorry.
yeah, no, that's totally,
Uh,
yeah, totally fine. Did you,
but
when you speak of survivor's guilt, what about like with your parents too? Like, did you have like the sort of like guilt of like they experienced what they experienced in Vietnam and all their hardships, and kind of you get,
oh, 100% with my parents as well too. It's
mm-hmm,
like, I'm dealing with bullies or getting beat up or
yeah,
whatnot, or I'm
yeah,
broke, I'm broke as a kid.
mm-hmm,
They literally had to dodge
yeah,
AK-47 bullets,
mm-hmm,
landmines.
right,
Like, who's like,
yeah,
I think their situation was a little bit worse than mine, right? Just a
right,
little bit.
mm-hmm,
But I think the reason why I mentioned, losing friends and whatnot is that
mm-hmm,
I always had this deep thought process over the course of my whole entire life of
mm-hmm,
like, why not me? Why not me? And I think that kind of drove me to do volunteer work in a community kitchen. I mean, in a rehabilitation kitchen program in San Quentin Prison. And what I've learned working in that space is that that's the only place in the whole entire penitentiary that people of different colors
mm,
can work with each other without being killed. Right?
wow,
A
mm-hmm.
guy from Aryan Brotherhood, a black kid from that's a Slauson Crip from LA,
Mhm.
Asian, brown, North Daniel, whatever, all in the same kitchen working together.
Yeah.
But and I think that's what and in those moments I start to understand the power of food.
Mm.
Is because when I cooked alongside with them, they would taste things, they would recall memories about their childhood. These men who were incarcerated became kids again,
Mm.
right? And
Mhm.
for me, that's the direct correlation of culture, the importance of it, right?
Mhm.
Is if you can understand who you are, where you came from, no matter what the story is, you can put value to society, value to earth. I know that feeling,
Mhm.
right? I know friends who've had that same feeling where, especially in the toxicity of men in gangs, you have no self-worth. Because you have no self-worth, you're going to go out and do damage. And then referencing Tupac, right? Like
Mhm.
one of the things that stuck in my mind growing up was that I always quote him is that, one of the most dangerous things is being young, black, and not giving a fuck. But I
Mm.
think that term has evolved to any person of color,
Yeah.
right? And not giving a fuck. But that's
Mhm.
the most dangerous person in society.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Is that where you volunteered? Is that kind of like where you started like cooking in your career? Like when did that journey start?
oh, great question. I started that journey, um, I think after I was doing pop-ups after Rising Star Chef and all that
Mhm.
stuff. I just kind of did it privately and internally just to kind of learn more about the situation
Mhm.
and give support to the community, I mean the organization beneficiaries, which are the incarcerated men.
Mhm.
But I did that, I think 2018,
Okay.
2017 to 2019. So, but yeah, like deep into my career already,
Mhm.
I was
Okay.
already good. So,
Gotcha. So how
um,
did you get into this career?
I had a friend that created the program who worked over at Chef Warehouse. Her name was Lisa, and she invited me into the program
Okay.
because I think we were always connected, and she knew how passionate I was about community.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah.
and it just one thing led to another. Just
Mhm.
saying yes to a door that was open to me, and it changed my life. I think I was in that program for about 2 years, 2.5 years.
Mhm.
So,
Wow.
and it was a weekly commitment, and we cooked for them. We cooked for the men on Monday. And each Monday, we would have a new progression of class.
Mm.
Every quarter, by the end of the quarter, it was our hope to get them safety SANI certified. Not
Mhm.
certified, certificate, excuse me.
Okay.
So,
Wow. Wow. That's awesome. And I
yeah.
love that. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that, food is our universal language. Where we can all kind of come together for that moment. So yeah,
It humanizes
it
people.
humanizes
No
people.
matter
Yeah.
how scary you
Mm-hmm.
are, no
Mm-hmm.
matter how racist you are,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what's wrong or what's good with you,
Yeah.
I think good food can uh destroys it can minimize people's walls,
Mm-hmm.
prejudices, everything in
Mm-hmm.
between,
Yeah.
right? And it would take them back to like a moment of innocence. Like, I love this taste because
Yeah.
I've had it before. Or if
Mm-hmm.
they never even tasted before, like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
This is delicious,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like purely innocent,
Yeah.
right?
Purely innocent.
Moments.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Yeah. No, totally. Okay, take me back. Take me back to your pop-ups. Is that kind of when you started your career as
Holy
a
shit.
chef? Do we want to go back there?
Oh, we can. I'm super open about it. It's in the cookbook as
Yeah.
well too, but
Yeah.
I'm not one to over glorify how it was amazing. I'm total opposite. Like
The truth.
it was it was great, but it was fucked up.
It was great, but it was fucked up. Yeah, that's sums it. Yeah, yeah. Wow, I read one of your posts where you kind of like were really talking about it, how, running around from here to there, lugging all your stuff, pouring all, finances into it.
Went broke, right?
Yeah, man, man. But you didn't like you kept going. Like what do you think made you keep going?
Well, if I could start off with the reason I started the pop-ups in the first place, because I had this conviction.
Mhm.
Maybe I was vindicated. Either one.
Yeah.
From a former restaurant owner that told me that you run a Michelin rated California restaurant, and we don't do Asian food here. And I was
Mhm.
purely just trying to use up the inventory from the previous chef. That
Wow.
pissed me off. And I remember thinking, why did he feel so threatened
Yeah.
of who I am and me touching these Asian ingredients when
Uh,
I'm putting literally the same ingredients, the same menu items from what the chef did before. It's okay for the white chef before to use these Asian ingredients, but the moment I do the same exact
Mm.
thing, literally the same exact thing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm I was threatening his identity
Yeah.
of
And
his restaurant.
I love that you recognize it as a threat and like didn't internalize that. So yeah, because that's
Yeah,
what
so,
it
so
was.
I so I quit. It's like,
There you
peace out,
go.
bro. Peace out. And I had this vindication to do my own thing. I'm like,
Yeah.
he was so threatened by who I am. It's just giving me fuel for my fire to
Mm-hmm.
explore this.
Yeah.
So I started doing pop-ups. And that's why that kind of explains why I went broke, because I needed to, in my young self, I needed to illogically prove a point,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I needed to show, and at that time there weren't progressive tasting menus for people of color. There just wasn't,
Mm.
right? We're talking about 2013 to 2014. No one, specifically for Vietnamese food, no one was going to pay $80 for a tasting menu, $100 for a tasting menu of Vietnamese food
Mm.
when they could go to Little Saigon and get a banh mi for $5,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in doing so, I went broke trying to prove that. I was lugging around 3 days a week, two in San Francisco, the third on Friday, Saturday, the third was on a Sunday in Oakland, and I would do 12 courses,
Mm.
right? And I didn't have the money to buy the super high-end plates. So I had IKEA and Daiso, shout out to you guys, milk crates full. So you say 12 courses. We reuse some plates for different courses. So let's
Mm-hmm.
call it 5 courses,
Mm-hmm.
but then you double that up and you make it into 12 courses. So a room full of 40 people. So 40 plates plus one course is 40 plates. So times by five, 200 plates in
Oof.
milk crates with their silverware, with the linens that I need to wash every day,
Yeah.
the wine glasses, and then the water glasses and carafes to go with that. And that's just basics, not
Mm-hmm.
including the food and the equipment. And mind you, the reason I had to move from one place to the other is because I didn't have the budget, the means, the resources to rent a place to keep my stuff there. So I would book event spaces out
Yeah.
for the evening and have to be out by midnight, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for 3 years, 4 years,
Wow. That's
right?
a long time. I'm like hyperventilating, with sweats over here, just whew, bringing me to my catering days and my restaurant days. Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Between two cities. And in the beginning it was great. I could get, $80 for a tasting menu.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, for all of you wondering, no, I didn't have a wine permit or license to sell wine, but we did it anyways. I'm not advising anyone to do that, but that's just the truth, right?
The way it
I paid
goes.
my taxes. How about that? I paid my taxes. I
Love
paid my
it.
taxes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
In addition to that, um, in the very beginning it was $80 tasting me. I tried to do 100. In the first month, your friends and family comes out, but after that, you have to rely on the public.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up charging $40 for a tasting menu for 8 courses, 10 courses,
Wow.
just to get people in the door. What broke doing that?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Wow. And so what happened after that? Is that kind of when you got the opportunity with Top Chef? That happened after that or
It's very interesting. I feel like whether you're spiritual or religious, I'm gonna
mm-hmm.
come from a spiritual aspect. The universe will give you everything right before it bring you to your knees,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was broke. I was in debt, tens of thousands of dollars on my credit card, trying to make things happen. Um, Coming up to the point where I was seriously consider quitting and not doing it again and pivoting back
Yeah.
into like a corporate chef job,
Mm.
right? Or something similar. And I remember in my last month of doing so, there was a week that I went up to the Sonoma Coast to go diving because I harvested seaweed for my pop-up and some
Mm-hmm.
other things, X, Y, and Z. And I didn't have reception. I got a phone call from Paulo Lucchesi. Shout out to Paulo. So Paulo Lucchesi was a former food editor for San Francisco Chronicle.
Mm.
He had left a message on my phone. It's like, hey, I have an important message I want to tell you. I'm like, "Who- why did he call me from San Francisco Chronicle?" Called him back a few hours later, and he mentioned that I was going to be part of the San Francisco Rising Star Chef class, right? And people who've been a part of that class, Nate Yoon, James Beard, Eater,
Mm-hmm.
like one of the nation's best chefs, Rima Sil, Corey Lee, Thomas Keller, Josh Skeens of Season, 3 stars. Corey Lee was 3 stars as well. I believe Dominic Crenn, like all of these amazing Bay Area chefs who are world renowned have been a part of that class.
Mm-hmm.
And then to compound that, I had applied for Top Chef from I think earlier that year. They called me that informed me, I think a few weeks later, that I was going to be part of the show. So I was kind of on cloud nine. And I think
Mm-hmm.
from that moment, the trajectory of my career just totally changed.
Yeah.
And I learned that, and this was my conviction. I think this was my saving grace. I didn't do every pop-up perfectly. I fucked up a lot of meals,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it was extremely challenging to do with limited resources. But for the ones that I did do right, even when I fucked it up, I leaned into it and I made sure and I tried my best. And I think in my luck, in my in those moments where I did do it right, I serve some key people who changed the trajectory of my life,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And I think perfect is never perfect. There's always going to be something wrong, right? And
Yeah.
I learned in those moments that if you do something, do it like you love it every day,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you never know who's going to be tasting, who's going to be watching, who's going to be
Exactly.
experiencing.
Mm-hmm. And now today you have your book, um, Memory of Taste. Let's see. Taste of the Memory of Taste.
The nerve taste, you got it right.
Yeah, baby brain here. And you just opened up your restaurant, wine bar as well. Tell us a
Yes.
little bit about that.
Um, the cookbook has been great. Publications have been loving it, and support has been overwhelming. Thank you, everyone. If you didn't buy the book yet, make
Get
sure you check it
it.
out. Just Google search the Memory of
Yes.
Taste cookbook to buy your copy. And Gigi's is a Vietnamese influenced wine bar. We have advanced sommeliers on the team that are curating a very serious wine menu with at accessible price points with fun Vietnamese food. Think Vietnamese tapas.
Mm,
And we're on Divisadero page in San Francisco, and so far the neighborhood's been loving it. So,
nice. That's
very honored,
amazing.
very blessed.
Amazing. Congratulations. Congratulations.
Mhm.
And I mean,
Thank
it's
you.
ups and downs. It's definitely not an easy, like overnight success. You know, you're very vocal about
Never,
that. You're very
never.
transparent. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can't have wins. When people ask me about being successful, I'm like, that's bullshit. I'm successful. All successful means to me is the support of my community and
Mm,
people who have supported me. Like
yeah.
like I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to do the things that I do today if those community key figures helped me out. Mom, dad, friends,
Mm-hmm.
um, basketball coaches, school teachers,
Mm-hmm.
library program managers,
Yeah.
nonprofit community organizing spaces, after school programs, um, culinary uh, culinary mentors, chefs,
Mm-hmm.
um, and even strangers who pat me, who told me to have a good day, or even customers who said this is a great meal.
Yeah.
All that combined, right? That's what makes success, and it has nothing to do
Mm-hmm.
with me being self-made, which is
Yeah.
bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely takes a village. So I want to kind of get back to when you were talking about, culture can mean many different things to different people. I love that. That's a new insight for me because I think I've always just never felt like I belonged to like any space that I was in, whether it be here trying to fit in with Americans and this or that. So I've always kind of just tried to fit in and try to connect to something and feel like I belong to a culture or something. It seems like you kind of had a little bit of a different experience, mostly in part to growing up in Oakland and kind of the melting pot and your experience there, and having black and brown people around you. It sounds like it was a completely different experience. Did you ever feel like you needed to Americanize your food, or like you do? It sounds like you do like fusion. Did you ever have a battle of like authentic Vietnamese food or kind of like a fusion of like your California upbringing?
I would love to say, at least in my Vietnamese community, I feel like the word authentic tied to Vietnamese food is only often used here in the
Mm-hmm.
United States,
Really?
right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like everyone back in Vietnam, they don't give a shit about authenticity. They think
Mm.
they are always enterprising the street food carts in their restaurants because it's their interest to sell out. They don't
Yeah.
care if it's traditional. if it is traditional, it's because it's delicious and people don't
Mm-hmm.
want you to change it. And they keep it the
Mm.
same way for like 100 years, 50 years, 20
Yeah.
years, right? And I feel like that's true in a lot of countries, not just Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people get over obsessed with the term authenticity a little bit
Mm-hmm.
too much because you got to keep in mind some things that were traditional before were at one time not traditional at all.
Yeah.
You got me fucked up if you said spaghetti and tomatoes has always been there. That shit came from tomatoes came from North America, you
Right.
know.
Yeah.
You want to talk about, tapioca dumplings? That shit came from South America. You need to check
Yeah. Oh
yourself,
my gosh, the
right? Like,
tapioca battle. I know. Sometimes,
right? Like
yeah,
tapioca batter.
I know. Well, everybody thinks it's, an Asian ingredient and just really the where it's from and
You,
the
you
even the
want to talk
word.
about you want to talk about fried chicken? You
Yeah.
want to talk about the black GIs? Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So understand and respect people's emotional attachment to
Hmm.
food, but don't impose that shit on me
I love
because
it.
you didn't come with facts for me, right?
Yes.
So I think what I do is because people come from different places, I always welcome innovation, I always welcome fusion because
Mm.
especially if it's done in an organic way, I think it's always appreciated. For reference, I grew up with a Korean neighbor who spoke fluent Vietnamese and and she cooked Korean food. However, I thought she was Vietnamese, cooking Vietnamese food, because as a kid, if a person near and dear in your life cooks for you, speaks Vietnamese, you would assume that she is Vietnamese and she's cooking Vietnamese food. And
Mm.
in the most organic way, and the reason she was a Korean woman who spoke fluent Vietnamese was that her family enterprised ginseng in Vietnam, and they were there for a few generations.
Oh,
But she was 100% Korean, like no
wow.
doubt,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And her finding a bond between my parents integrated a lot of Korean ingredients like banchan,
Hmm.
gobo, um, dried anchovies into our cooking, and that's what I grew up with. So whether you want to call it authentic or not, that's something
Hmm.
that I enjoyed, and that's something that
Hmm.
my parents experienced in their diaspora as Vietnamese people.
Hmm.
I think it's delicious, so I think it should be celebrated. And then you
Yeah.
could create new traditions with that,
Yeah.
right? And that exists all over the world.
Hmm.
Jamaican Chinese cuisine, right? You
Yeah.
wouldn't have birria if you didn't have folks from Middle East and North Africa bringing in over spices to the Gulf of Mexico, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't have fried fish tacos without Japanese immigrants on the coast of Baja California bringing in over tempura,
Hmm.
right? You fucking, excuse my French, but um,
Yeah.
avocado toast, I
Right.
think, but
Yeah.
I think he goes on and on. Chipinos, right? The emergence
Hmm.
of, Italian immigrants here based in San Francisco, California, making Italian seafood off the coast of California, specifically San Francisco.
Hmm.
Green goddess dressing. Like it goes on and on and on. Like if you're
Yeah.
gonna attack that notion or the idea of what is authentic or what
Yeah.
isn't,
Except
um,
Pandora's box.
just eat whole fruits.
Exactly. No, this is great because I feel like sometimes even I get caught up in kind of just like all that nonsense and what everybody is saying, like with the culinary voice, like did you ever struggle to find your culinary voice or is there even such a thing, or is it just about cooking good food, what goes good with what? Like are we overthinking it?
I would I would suggest that I want to reiterate that my culinary voice is a reflection of the people behind me, the community behind me.
Mhm.
I it's I have a privilege to stand on a big stage, and it's my responsibility to shine their voices. So this is not
Mhm.
my voice at all, right?
Mm.
The
Mhm.
whole self thing,
Yeah.
I don't get down with that. And not that
Mhm.
it's wrong, it's just not
Mhm.
how I vibe.
Mhm.
Number one, and number two, um, I think just kind of pivoting back to identity and culture. Oh, I wanted to talk about cultural appropriation.
Mm.
Um, However, there is a thing called cultural appropriation. I think it gets wrong when someone tries to uh, profit off of something that's not their own culture without doing the due diligence. I
Mhm.
think one of the people who I greatly admire, who celebrates another culture, profits off of it, but does it responsibly is Ivan Ramen.
Mm.
Spent a lot of time in Japan. His family members are Japanese. His wife is Japanese. Both his previous wife, his late wife, and then his recent wife. His kids are half Japanese. So he's fully integrated in the culture. So the things that he's
Yeah.
doing is not just for people outside of Japan, but he's serving multiple communities, including Japanese people.
Yeah.
So there are benefits on both sides. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the responsible way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a corporation, company, or entrepreneurs in business, and you decide to trademark the term pho,
Mm.
so you could shut down all small mom and pop pho businesses,
Mm-hmm.
that's clearly cultural
Yeah.
appropriation.
Yeah.
If you are a spice company, right, and you want to create a black spice blend to celebrate Black History Month, so you can capitalize on so you could be profitable in that month. That's cultural appropriation,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
right?
totally. Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Right.
Any advice, any tips to, especially minority people of color who want to, follow the footsteps in this, culinary career?
You know, I I love people of color, but I think as we merge into 2025, 2026,
Mhm.
I think if I'm speaking for anybody, I want to speak about marginalized peoples. And that includes people of all colors, that includes mothers, that
Mhm.
includes everyone who doesn't have any the benefits that the rest of the population has,
Yeah.
right? So when I speak for marginalized people, I want to say that I've understood that the gradient, the hill that you have to climb to be equal is greater than your average person.
Mhm.
But just because that hill is steep doesn't mean it's not climbable,
Mm.
right? So
Mhm.
whatever you do, just if you go into life understanding that you don't have as much privilege and you have to work twice as hard, willingly, if you can understand that, if you willingly do it, I pray and hope that you get to the places that you dream of because it is possible.
Amazing. Thank you so
So,
much, Chef. It's been such a wonderful conversation. I feel like we can have a part two, part three. There's
mhm,
so many things that we didn't even get to delve into. You share so much wisdom, so much knowledge, far beyond food, which is really a testament to, who you are. Thank you so much. I'm
thank
really
you.
honored that you took some time to chat with me today. Thank you, thank you. Tell folks how they can find you, how they can support your work and connect with you.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys could find me at www.chef2.com and all my social media handles. It's at Chef Tu David Phu. Send me a DM, send me an email, leave me a comment, and I'll respond.
He does. He does, definitely.
Mhm.
The Memory of Taste, his cookbook. Get that if you don't have that already. And if you are in the Bay Area, visit Gigi's. Thank you so much, Chef. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Dishing Up Diaspora, where we'll continue to explore how food connects us to each other.